Hey, Tom. How are you?
Welcome to episode number 54, Social Selling 2.0.
54.
54, man, getting up there.
Man, we're
Um,
going to blink and it'll be 100. I mean, we blinked and all of a sudden it's October. Can you believe it's October, everybody? Whew.
yeah, if you believe it's October, please put it in the chat because I don't believe it's October. It
I
seems more
know.
like,
I
I
know.
don't know, March maybe, something like that.
Well, well, here's what we'll do with everybody coming on. Put in the comments like normal. Tell us, who you are or where you're from. Tell us if this is your first time seeing the episode. And then if you're US based, I want to know if anyone else got totally scared when the emergency broadcast test went off about an hour or so ago. I knew it was coming and then I forgot about it, and my phone and my watch went off, and the Apple Watch vibrates, and oh my gosh, I jumped out of my chair.
Were you like heading for the
Definitely.
basement or something, ready to take cover?
Now, as soon as it like within a second, I realized what it was because I knew it was coming, but that fraction of a second there, man, I
All right.
nearly
Well,
soiled myself.
this is a little bit strange because we don't have a guest today. We've had a guest, I think, almost for the last 8 or 10 weeks.
I
Carson,
know.
I
Well,
think, is going to be coming here before too long. I know he's in the middle of shifting jobs, so he's been juggling a lot of things, and it just seems so quiet here with just you and I. But
yeah.
that
Well,
doesn't
the
mean it
other
won't be
the
a
other
great show.
thing is, yeah, I'd love to hear if anybody, if you're here, would you throw in the comments, because we had a challenge with Restream and the event, and it got canceled, and we reset it up. So it's not normal to not have comments on there of people saying they're here. Oh,
Go
there
ahead,
we
Mark.
go. Mark will be a
All right.
guest.
Yes,
We need Mark to come back as a guest.
that's
At
right.
least we got Mark here. Phew,
That's right.
I feel
Okay.
better now.
No, we had a lot of problems with
All right,
LinkedIn
well,
today.
let's.
I don't know if that was related to your, emergency broadcasting thing or not, but um, all right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
Mark. All right.
glitches
Good.
in traffic.
Relief. Relief.
Yeah. Well,
All
let's
right.
jump into this because I think this is a very important topic, and one that we've had a lot of experience with over the last year. And I think whether you're watching this live or you're listening to this as a recording, um, last week it was perfectly set up. And sorry, Tom, I kind of jumped and ran with it, but last week we had Morgan Ingram as a guest, and it was a perfect setup to what we're doing today because he came in. The first thing he said was, when number one, he says the traditional marketing, the traditional digital marketing, so really things that companies have been doing in the last, call it 15 years. I think it's a little bit shorter than that, but let's call it 15 years since, say, 2010-ish, with landing pages, with marketing qualified leads, with MQL scores, with cold email outreach. And then on the sales side, with cold email and cold calling outreach, as Morgan said, it's dying, if not dead. And then the other key stat that he brought up last week, which we've talked about, I think it was so important, and we need to talk about it more. We all need to be reminded of this, is that at any given time, about 3 to 5% of your ideal prospects are currently in market, but that's only 3 to 5%. So if that means the other, say, 95% are not in market, but we're talking to them from a sales perspective like they're in market, we miss. There's just a big miss. And Tom, as you always bring up, is if they're in market, it's probably a red ocean for us, because that means they've been doing their own research. They're probably already talking to two or three other vendors, and now you're in this thing competitively. But if we take a step back and we look from a perspective of creating demand instead of capturing demand, then what we're doing is we're getting in front of prospects earlier in their buying cycle, even before they're in a buying cycle, before they're in market. But it's a time that we can align our marketing and sales activities with the way that buyers prefer to buy these days. Because we got to remember, buyers don't need us anymore. They don't need salespeople anymore. They can do all the research they want on their own. So that's really the foundation of what we're talking about today. And sorry, Tom, I kind of jumped into it because I'm really excited for this topic.
Yeah, boy, that covered it, I think. But I think it's important, first of all, this 5%, 3%, whatever it is. Right. It will vary obviously based on the market that you're in and what you're selling. But if you're a startup or an early stage company that's selling maybe a unique product, a new product, it may be way less than that because they've never heard of you, right? They've never
Right.
even heard of the product. May not even be aware that such a product exists. So the
It's a great
5% is
point.
actually in some cases generous, right? Depending upon what you're selling.
Yeah.
For a lot of us, we're in probably a 1 to 3% range of people that are in market and actively looking to buy for whatever it is that we're selling in our market. And yes,
Yeah.
everybody is trying to go after those fish, right? We're all fishing for those things here. And then what we do with the other 95, or I'll just call it 95 to be too generous here, the other 95% is we treat them, like you said, like they're in market. And all that does is piss them off and not want to deal with us. Right.
Man, we
So,
miss it.
right. So what we wanted to talk about today, and we are going to talk about today, is three strategies that we've learned, and not only learned, but I think proven. We're really proving with some good
Yeah.
analytics that
Yeah.
help you go into that 95% and do two things. One, get yourself so that they're at least becoming aware and having some interest in potentially what you do, starting to build demand and starting to
Mhm.
build trust. But when it does come time when they do go in market, or if they start doing their research, you're included. You're included. You're part of the process versus, you call it on your buyer circle of trust, right? Be on the outside looking
Yeah.
in. And,
Yeah.
and we want to do that as early as we can.
Yeah, and this also sets up, some of the examples that we've shared other times on the show, like the person who is in a C-suite with an $18 billion global company that I didn't even know was paying attention to our show, aware of the show. She had never commented on the show, so I didn't even know she was paying attention. And then I get a direct message from her saying, "Hey, I've been watching your show. I'd love to have a conversation about what y'all doing. I think we have a need." And that opened the door to this conversation. Now, if we were relying on just cold outreach, I'm sure I never would have gotten to her. Cold calls, cold emails, it would have been met with the same way, especially going to a C suite of an $18 billion company.
Yeah.
It's very, very low probability of getting through that way. But by using the show, using messaging from the show, using shorts and snippets from the show to really build our brand, build our reputation, and use it as part of our personal brand and our social selling, which is all from the personal side process, really made a difference. So a lot of those types of stories. There's lots of those other ones that we have. We have a customer right now that we're working with that was another one that said, "Hey, do you have time to talk with us about what's happening, what we're working on, what we're doing? We think you guys could help." You're like, "Yeah, absolutely." So, yeah. So, Tom, I'm sorry. I'm really excited about this topic, and so I'm going to let you kind of lead the conversation, so I don't run us in five different directions. And I'd love to hear from people on the show right now too. And if you're listening to the podcast, you can comment on our podcast or go to our LinkedIn page. But I'm really, really curious what other people are experiencing right now when it comes to their cold outreach or their traditional digital marketing. And how's it working? How effective is it? Or is the data that we see, the experiences that we've had about the efficacy dropping dramatically? Is that what other people are experiencing?
Yeah. And I think what we wanted to cover today are three things that we have learned. And I think all of this sort of falls under the broader social selling umbrella. Some people might say, well, this is a bit more marketing, this is a bit more selling. Okay. But there's three areas that we have seen that tactics and strategies you can use to go after that 95%. That's a lot more effective than cold email, cold outreach, cold calls, everything like that, that we're all doing everything we can to push away from it. So
Right.
so you started to touch with there's three that we want to hit on. I'm going to mention all three and then let's kind of deep dive in each one.
Sure.
So the first one, which you started to touch on, fancy term here that we call episodic content, right?
Mhm.
And what we mean by that is content that is episodic, right? It goes from one week to the next, hence like the show here. The second is personal brand. So personal brand is, how do you use personal brand to start to become visible and aware in that 95%? And then the third is, which is an area that we've been doing a lot of, I guess, testing with recently, is, and certainly Morgan brought this up last week, is how do you use live events and amplify the live events? More and more companies are doing live events more than ever. It seems like live events are very much back in the picture. How do you use those, especially when they're so expensive, to get the most out of them and to leverage that FaceTime and stuff? So we're going to hit each one of those. And yeah, let's spotlight Mark's comment here, because I think he said it well, right? Cold outreach does not work well. Many calls with few connections to a suspect. It's an unexpected interruption in their day, an unwanted interruption in their day.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
well
And what I
stated.
appreciate about that, and for those who don't know, Mark is a global sales trainer for IBM. He works with, I think he says, 18,000 salespeople across the country that he works with in groups and in individual one on one. And I've heard Mark say this multiple times on Zoom calls with him and phone calls with him, that they're struggling because the traditional cold outreach is just not performing the way it used to. And yet they're struggling with, what do we do differently?
Right.
And even going into LinkedIn itself, when we recreate our cold email tactics, but we just use LinkedIn instead of email, we still end up with the same response rates, which is a
Yeah.
lot of ignoring.
Right. It's just cold outreach that's not resulting in anything, however the
Yeah.
channel is. All right. Well, let's
Yeah.
take each of these three. You started to touch on the episodic content. Again,
Yeah.
fancy word for some content, but it's content that you're doing generally in a sequence over time, and it has a theme or an episodic approach to it. So certainly a live show like we're doing here is a
Mhm.
form of episodic content. Podcast, right, which is an audio version of what we're doing here, is
Mhm.
episodic content. And people ask this all the time, Brandon. Well, should I do a live show or do I do a podcast?
Mhm.
And our answer is all of the above, for
Yeah.
lots of reasons, right? A lot of people just like to listen when they're in the car or walking or doing whatever. Other people will attend and they want to see the live show because they want to participate or whatever. So I don't know that's an either or.
Mhm. Yeah, and I would add to the mix too is webinars.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Doing,
Yeah, webinar. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
adding. So you got the live show, you got the podcast, and you have webinars. And the other reason I like the live show with video is really like what we do with our live show. And people listening, you've probably seen us in other platforms. We take excerpts from the show in 30-second and 1 minute clips, and then we're publishing those out on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and even Twitter to amplify our reach. So anyone that doesn't necessarily want to sit and watch the entire show or listen to it on a podcast, we're using the shorts and the snippets. Oh yeah, we add those to YouTube as well. I totally forgot, but we publish those out at scale. So every day our snippets or our shorts are getting pushed out through the other channels. Now, why is this important? And I know a lot of times we hear people say, "Oh, you know what? We only use LinkedIn because LinkedIn's for business," and or we get C-suite people. I mean, we experienced this just a couple of weeks ago. It's like, "Well, I don't use Link or I don't use Facebook, and I'm not on Facebook, and I don't think we need to be on Facebook because that's just for personal stuff." But when you look at the data, on average, and I probably should have looked up this data because I haven't looked at it recently. So the numbers might be a little bit off, but I know the consistency, the trend is the same. On average, a LinkedIn user logs in twice a week. On Facebook, the average user logs in 3 times a day. And on Instagram, they log in 5 to 6 times a day. So, what does that mean for us? Well, it means if they are using Facebook and Instagram or even TikTok, and I don't know the login numbers for TikTok right off, but if they're using those for their personal life, they're logging in more often there. And if we put our shorts there and we do some targeted advertising with custom audiences and things like that, we're getting our message in front of them more often. We're getting our brand in front of them more often. And we know the challenge of being seen in this crowded, noisy space of digital. But if when they go to log into Instagram, they're taking a break from their day, they're at lunch, they're at dinner, whatever, and they're flipping through Instagram and they see our short there, they see our brand. When we're more engaging with them on LinkedIn, there's already a familiarity. And this is what we talk about, digitally dominating the newsfeed for your industry. But we just have to be in more places. When you do a live show like this for 30 minutes or 40 minutes, with those shorts, you have all this content to be able to push out and be in front of people every single day in lots of places. That is so important right now, because
Yeah.
brand awareness and nurturing people while they're in that, they're not in the revenue zone, they're still sitting back and kind of paying attention, but you don't even know it. We need to be in front of them a lot. You need to have your brand and your people in front of them a lot.
Well, and unfortunately, right, we've certainly lived through this and we hear this all the time. Well, how do I measure this? And it's very hard to measure it because you don't know who's watching, right? LinkedIn doesn't give you very good analytics on who's watching this right now. And there's other, as you just talked about, as I, roll out some of the different things on the social media platforms, um, that's also can be challenging. So you have to kind of trust the process versus
Mhm.
trying to look at everything about the analytics and how many people came from the, this or that. And every day, I have two shows I'm on. Every day I hear from people that said, I saw you on your show or I liked your episode and I had no idea they were there. Right. And so
Yeah.
it's that
I,
self-reported attribution that's going to, or
yeah.
that you're going to, be able to see, okay, is this working over time? But you can't
Yeah.
expect to measure it the way you may want to measure traditional sort of actions.
Yeah, I got a message today via InMail. So it's somebody I'm not connected to, that said, and I can't remember the exact details. I'm going to paraphrase it, but it was basically, hey, I've just started, trying social selling over the last couple of months. I'm really struggling. Do you have any advice for me to help me get started? Right. I don't know who this person is. I didn't know them before, but I'm going to make the assumption that the show, our snippets, my own personal posts, so my personal brand, our thought leadership, both as a brand and me personally, has influenced this person to a point that they sent me a message asking for help. Right? There's not a perfect attribution model with that from typical marketing. Like, did they do a Google search? Did they, come straight to our website? Did they click a link in an email? No, it was from, the term we've used is dark social. It's this type of content that gets spread out throughout the interwebs that creates an impression, and then they're reaching out to us or reaching into
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. And I want to touch on Butch's question. Butch, I'm not sure if you're referring to a live show, like what we're a live LinkedIn show, or are you talking about a live actual in-person event? Um,
Yeah,
we can
I
answer.
bet, I bet he's talking about a live show like this, and
Okay.
we got to put together just a simple how-to of what we do for people, and I'll get that done over the next week or two and add it to my my LinkedIn article, my newsletter for people. But what we do, it's oh, and by the way, we offer this as a service too. We create, manage, and produce live shows and podcast and amplify the shorts, create the shorts and amplify the shorts with paid advertising for customers if anyone needs help. But you want to do it on your own, use a tool like we currently use Restream. There's also StreamYard. The value of that is that you log into a studio, which is what we're on. You can send links and let guests log in, and we all can attach or connect our own social accounts. So this show right now is streaming live to my personal Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter accounts. It's going to our Social Selling 2.0 LinkedIn page, YouTube channel, Twitter account, I believe, is what we've done. But it's going out to 6 right now. When Carson's here, it usually goes out to 9. When we have a guest, it might go out to 12 different feeds simultaneously. So use a Restream tool like this. We use Buzzsprout for our podcast, which is a great tool. Once you get it set up, we take our audio files, we edit them, and when we publish to Buzzsprout, it automatically then gets pushed out to about 15 different podcast players. So it goes to Apple, it goes to Spotify, it goes to the big ones. And so it reduces the amount of work that you have to do. I mean, when we're talking about shorts and snippets and live shows and podcasts, I know that could get overwhelming for people, but there are ways to do it in a more efficient manner. And the key there, though, is this type of content that we're doing, this long form content, is the foundation for lots of shorts. We do 15 to 20 shorts per week based on a single episode, which gives us plenty of new stuff to be sharing throughout all of our social
Yeah.
channels.
And a lot of that's evergreen, so it can be used over and over and over. Um,
Yeah.
and there's tons of stuff coming when you look at the AI world, some of the tools that are coming with AI, the ability for people who are doing their research to find the types of things that we're doing through AI and other places
Mhm.
is also going to expand. So think of us as just, anytime you're doing something like this, you're creating content and data that ultimately is going to fuel some of the AI engines in the future as
Yeah.
well.
And I
So
know Carson's really swamped today as he's transitioning roles at Microsoft and wasn't able to join us. But I was hoping, because he's done a really amazing job with taking our long form shows, using AI to create 10 and 20 different social posts throughout the week for his own personal brand, and then pushing those out to LinkedIn and Instagram and TikTok and others. So he demonstrates and uses that well. And we just have not used AI as much for the social side. Our marketing assistant does a lot of that for us, but we probably need to get her using AI to save a lot of time for
yeah,
her as
no,
well.
and we'll talk more about that. All right. So first strategy, episodic content. I think we've covered that well. The next strategy,
Yeah.
which and all of these are
Can I
related,
can I
by the
add
way.
one more?
Yeah.
Can I add one more thing to that, though? Because if there's sales leaders or C-suite out there thinking, well, this is about marketing, it's also about selling. And as I know, we're going to go into the personal brand side. So I think it'll be a good transition. But these snippets are great pieces of content that salespeople can share. Whether they share it in email, they share it in direct message on LinkedIn or other platforms, or even if you're to a point you can text to people and send them a link. Hey, this is a 30-second or a 1 minute clip talking about XYZ topic. I thought you'd find value in it because, and share that type of information with them. So we're not asking them to watch a 30 or 40-minute show. We can feed them little chunks of content as a way to demonstrate our expertise and the company's expertise. I think it's really important for leaders to understand that this
Yeah.
is, it feeds both marketing and sales outreach.
And I'm glad you brought that up because we did touch on this with Mandy a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
Is look, this is a great way to pull together more of what the marketing team and the sales teams are doing by looking at relevant episodic content that the salespeople can use to drive sales, not just drive marketing actions. And this is what
Right.
I want to make, that's a great point because I want to reinforce this is all about driving your sales actions, which then tie into the second strategy that again we've seen continue to work is personal brand. And what I want, Brandon, I want you to touch on is what is the difference between building personal brand and social selling? Like I hear that
Yeah.
question a lot, and is there a overlap between them, or where is the gray area between those
Yeah.
two things?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would add that if we could look at personal brand, and if you're sitting there going, well, what exactly is a personal brand? It's a reputation, right? How are you known in the space? Not just your brand, but how are individuals in your company, from your C-suite, your leadership, to individual salespeople, to your customer success people, to ops people, to developers? Like, do they have a reputation? If people think about your company, do they think about just the name? Oh yeah, they're in this industry. Or even better, when they think, if you say a company name, they go, oh yeah, their CEO is so and so. I've seen them a lot online. Their leadership is this. I've seen they do a show, they do webinars, whatever it may be. Personal brand is about a reputation. Thought leadership is about controlling or influencing that reputation. That's the way I would differentiate. And then going into social selling, it's how do we use that personal brand and our thought leadership to create opportunities. So it might be from, I like to break down social selling into two stages as well. There's the prospecting stage. How are we building a healthy connection with somebody before we move into a sales stage, which is where we're trying to discover if there's an opportunity there? This is really important. Go all the way back to the beginning of our show and our show last week with Morgan. If only 3 to 5% of our population of prospects is currently in market, and we're trying to have a sales opportunity conversation with all 100% of them, 95% of the people, we're just bugging them. They're not in market, they're not thinking about it, it's not on their mind, and we're trying to say, do you want a demo? Can we talk about this? We're missing them entirely. And if we're aggressive with it, constant drip of emails, constant drip of LinkedIn messages trying to get in front of them, then we're also just bugging them and we're tarnishing our reputation so that when they are in market, they may think of us, but they may think negatively because we bug them with our constant messaging. So social selling for me, it's got to be looked at from two stages: prospecting, create that rapport and that healthy relationship, and then move into selling. And I know there's a lot of people out there that will poo poo that. They'll say, building rapport isn't necessary, it's not important. I just strongly disagree with that because people do business with people who they like, people who they know, people who they trust. And if we don't start from a place of rapport, we're trying to jump right to the putting a ring on somebody without ever getting to know them.
So to summarize, your personal brand is a function of obviously your content, right? To a degree, your content, your posting, your um, commenting. I said that already,
Yeah,
right? Commenting,
yeah,
posting, content, everything that you're doing there, and how you're interacting in general, and how you're perceived when
yeah,
someone goes and looks up you on LinkedIn, or even looks at you at Google to some degree, but looks up who you are, and is this person credible? And is this person somebody who I would want to have a healthy connection with and a healthy
right,
relationship with? And then ideally going one step further is, hey, I even if I'm not interested in buying, I'm interested in what they're talking about, right?
right,
So, and I think that's the biggest thing that we want to do in that 95% is if someone's not interested in buying, that's fine. But are they interested in what we're talking about? Are they interested in the subject? Are they interested in what the subject or the outcome is of the subject that we're talking about, whether or not they're thinking of buying or not? And I think that's what we're trying to do with personal brand is build some of that reputation of, hey, this is a person that I would like to be associated with because I find what they talk about relevant, interesting, and valuable.
and for them to know us and find our content interesting and valuable, we need a lot of repetition. Right? And that's because everything's noisy. People are busy. It's not like publish something once and expect people to remember us in 2 months or 3 months or 9 months, or when they move to the next company and then they're in a position to make those decisions. It's got to be that consistency. And so it brings us back to the episodic content because then we have all these shorts and snippets that we can use to stay top of mind.
Mhm.
So personal brand is really about how do we use our, and I'm just going to start with LinkedIn, but how do we use our LinkedIn presence? It's our profile and our activity in order to create conversations and relationship with our targeted audience. So it starts with our profile. We got to look from a, I mean,
I just
a
hold on,
word,
Brandon, before you go any further. You said with our targeted audience, right? I really want to nail that their targeted audience may be that 95%. It's not
right.
going after that 5%. It's building with that 95%, not
Yeah.
necessarily in the 5%. I just want to keep reinforcing that.
Yeah. And I would say too, a question that we get asked or a comment that gets made a lot is, yeah, social selling, we know it works, but we don't have time for it. Right? We've got these 30 days or these 60 days. At some point, that 30-day run just is exhausting. And if you look at the data, people aren't hitting their numbers because they're communicating with everybody in these 30 or 60-day or quarter windows. So if you go, and this is what we're talking about from the beginning, if only 5% are in market, but we're talking to all 100% of them like they're in market, we're losing opportunity to backfill our pipeline. So it's the process we talk about of going slow to move fast. We've got to nurture that. We've got to create it. So it's a difference between creating demand and just hunting for people who have their wallets out or are currently ready to buy.
Yeah.
And it becomes much more efficient when you create demand. And yeah, it takes a little bit of time, but it's worth it. And it's not huge amounts of time. It's not like you need a year to do this, but you got to get started in order to start building that backflow of pipeline of people that are thinking about you. They're preparing themselves to reach out to you or to talk to you. And you don't even know that they're doing that. You don't even know
Yeah.
that they're in that stage.
And I want to hit a couple things and then we'll move on to the third strategy. But I think Brian brings up a great point. I'm starting to find that consistency thing very relevant to what I'm doing. And you couldn't be more correct, Brian, because people sometimes need to see something 6, 7, 8, 10 times before they consider it even real
Mhm.
or valid. Right.
Yeah.
And so consistency is very important and having things over and over and over. And the fact is consistency and doing things over and over builds credibility, right?
Right.
We were more credible at episode 50 than we were at episode 5 for
Right.
no other reason for that we did 50 episodes. Whether they were good or not, we did 50
Yeah.
episodes, right?
Right.
So
Right.
it's like is consistency in doing things week in and week out and all of those things that all help to elevate and build that thought leadership and personal brand.
Yeah. And before we go on to the third one, I want to make sure, because we haven't talked about this, two things I keep thinking about. One is commenting, and one is the term buyer enablement. So, from a buyer enablement standpoint, I think it's become a bit of a trite term. It gets thrown around a lot, even in areas where something isn't really focused on the buyer, but we say it's our buyer enablement approach, even though it's really more from a seller enablement. Here's our process, here's what we're going to do, and we're going to expect buyers to follow in line and just march every step of the way. What we're talking about is truly coming at this from a buyer enablement perspective. How do we meet buyers where they are right now? Every buyer where they are right now in a way that leads them into our revenue zone or into an opportunity. The value of this is that if we talk the same way with all 100% of people, where we're educating, we're staying top of mind, we're sharing what we know, what we learn, what we experience, if they're, a week away from being in market or they're 4 months away from being in market, the conversation still has power, right? It's the same.
Mhm.
It's going to hit them the same no matter where they are. And then the last piece on that with personal brand is commenting. It is the most underutilized and the most powerful tool that we can use in LinkedIn for a couple of reasons. Number one, as Brian talked about, he's starting to find the value of consistency. When we comment and we strategically go and comment on prospective customers' post or their post activity, and that's really important because we hear a lot one of the first things we go, oh yeah, but our prospects never post. That's okay if they're consistent with being on LinkedIn, they're commenting on other posts, they react and like other posts, then we can leverage the power of LinkedIn, which is the notifications. So when we go to their post activity and we comment and consistently, not every now and then, comment once a week, comment twice a week, comment 3 times a month, whatever that right rhythm or sequence is for you, they're seeing us, they're seeing us, they're seeing us. We can't control if they see our post. You've got the algorithm, you got when they log in, you've got all kinds of algorithm things that influence whether they'll even see our posts. But we can take the same content from our posts and use it in comments and contribute to other people's posts through commenting and creating conversation. And the same thing happens. They see our picture, they see our name, they get a notification with our picture and our name. They see us active. And if what we're saying resonates, what we're talking about makes sense, it's adding value to them, we're building and growing our personal brand faster
Yep.
than we ever could just by posting. And what this allows us to do is individuals on a team, I don't care if you're in customer success, you're in operations, you're leadership, whatever, you build a personal brand because you're contributing to these conversations. We don't all need to be influencers. What we need is to be influential with a small group of people. 100, there's people talk about their top 100, their dream 100. I think that's great. Some of us, maybe it's 150 to 200 people. But if we are consistently contributing our voice, our experience, our knowledge, our awareness to those 100 to 200 people through posts, through comments, through using episodic content, getting this information and being consistent, we build a very strong personal brand and we stay top of mind and we become known for when they are ready. That is what personal branding is all about. We use LinkedIn and our activities to create conversations and become known in the industry.
Well, and you don't, as you said, you don't have to be an influencer. You honestly don't even have to be influential, but you have to be relevant and you have to be there. That's it. Relevant and communicate. And that can go a long way. All right, let's move to number three. This is an area we're getting a lot of interesting data from, which is leveraging your live in-person events versus your live digital events. More and
Mm-hmm.
more companies are doing in-person events. There seems to be kind of a resurgence of that, I'm seeing anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Different types of events, shorter events, longer events, whatever the case may be. And, but if you think about it, right, an in-person event is probably one of the most expensive marketing investments you're going to make. You almost always have travel, you may have a booth, you may have all kinds of things that go into making that investment. On the other hand, it may be one of the most powerful things you can do if you're leveraging that event well to have meetings and conversations that just are very difficult, if not impossible, to have online, right? One thing it's just really, this whole fragmented world of 30-minute Zoom meetings, it's hard and a lot of times to get anything
Mm-hmm.
going. Whereas if you have an opportunity to sit down with somebody, even for 30 minutes or a half hour, you can accomplish a lot more.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we're learning as we talk to people that are really out trying to do live in-person events is, well, how do I make sure I get the most out of that event? How do I make sure I have quality conversations when I'm there? How do I make sure that I'm getting a return on investment on the money and the people that I'm sending there? And the key thing that we've identified is that an event is not about how many scans you can get, right? I think events have historically been traditional sort of lead gen MQL. I scanned 500 people. And now I can start. These are quote unquote leads, even though they just came by to get a piece of candy from the booth, right? Those aren't
Mm-hmm.
really leads. Really, what it boils down to is how do you use the show to have high quality conversations with people that you've already built a relationship with, or you have relevance with, or you have influence with. Those conversations are going to be literally 10 or 20 times more relevant and
Mm-hmm.
more valuable than somebody coming by getting a boot scan. And
Yeah.
that's the first time they've heard of you.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at, what we're finding is that the things that we're talking about with episodic content and personal brand and thought leadership, all of those things can then be used to lead up to your live show basically schedule over the course of the year to make those way more relevant. And then there's other things we can do, which we'll tack on in a minute. But that's the
Yeah.
basic.
Yeah, so I have two stories and examples to share about that. So one of them is a little while ago I was working with the team, and it was a combination of SDRs and AEs, and they asked me to come in and do a short training as part of one of their meetings. So I logged in to the meeting, and they were running a little bit late, so I was just listening, and one of the marketing persons was on, and she was telling the team, "Hey, we just went to this conference." And so we have a whole bunch of newer leads that are going to be put into your CRM. So you've got a whole bunch of fresh people to start calling. And of course, the marketer's all excited about it. And then the marketer left. And before I started going into training, I'm listening to them talk about it. And their basic response was, oh, great, more calls that I'm going to make and leave a bunch of voicemails and not have people call me back because they're just people that came by, picked up a piece of swag, or the people in the booth are like, can I scan your badge? Can I scan your badge? Can I scan your badge? And so they have all these quote leads that are not leads, they're suspects. And they're not expecting a call. They don't want to call. They have no interest. But now you've got the SDR and the AE team that's being told, you got this fresh, bunch of leads to go after, go get them. And they're all like, ugh, they're just defeated because they're like, these are low quality. And now I know I got to put them in my sequence. I got to make the calls. I got to send the emails, and I have to chase a bunch of hollow air that's not going to be fruitful.
Worse than that, they're low quality and expensive, right? Those
Exactly.
scans are expensive when you put the
Right.
the cost per acquisition of a lead there.
Yeah. Well, and what Tom means by that for everybody is you take all those leads, you put them in the CRM, and now you've got SDR team or AE team or BDR team, whoever it is, that are spending their time, which costs you a lot of money. You got $5,000 or more per head per month for them to pound phones and send cold emails that have very little fruit.
Mhm.
Right. So on the opposite end, what we can do, and Trevor Van Weerden, who's I don't know if he's on today, but he has a great example of this. I worked with him probably a year and a half ago. We started about 6 months prior to a big conference of him building lists of people he expected to be at that show, who he wanted to have meetings with before at the show. So 6 months prior, he started doing his personal branding. He started sharing content. He started commenting on their activity, and he built a rapport, a relationship, whatever term you want to use. He built connection with them. He turned them into healthy connections. So a month before the show, before the conference, he was able to start reaching out to them and say, hey, you want to get to, are you going? Do you want to get together? And he built his schedule, filled it with meetings prior to even getting to the booth. So he wasn't relying on booth activity going, hey, do you want to talk? Do you want to talk? Do you want to talk? He didn't go walk around the aisles and go search for suspects. He built relationships over 6 months and filled his calendar prior. So he had said he had the most successful event he'd ever experienced. And he's our ageist. He's been selling forever. But he had the most successful event that moved him into the next year, where he had the most successful year of sales because he set it up the right way. And I get it that that's not about your 30, your 60, or your 90-day goals. But on the end of it, the upside, the revenue that was generated was better than ever before.
But if you look at it, and Carson talks a lot about his annual planning, right? He just went through his annual. If you look at if you start your whatever your sales year starts, and you say, okay, here's my goal for that year, and I'm going to be attending, let's say 4 events. Let's just keep it one a quarter, right? You can use those as sort of anchor points along the way that you're trying to then lead to build up those quality meetings, those high quality meetings at each of those events. Now those events are being used to move opportunities to customers versus getting low quality leads that I'm hoping to turn into an opportunity. A very
Right.
different strategy around the event. The second piece that we see, which is a byproduct of all the things we just talked about, is that yes, you'll get pre-scheduled meetings, but you'll also get a tremendous amount of booth traffic of people that already know who you are and will come to the booth and go, oh my God, I loved your video. I saw your this. And so even if
Mhm.
they're there
I
for the
watch your
very first,
show.
I watched your show. Even if they're there for the very first time and you're going to scan them, they're going to be a lot more high quality person coming there that you've already built some trust with and potentially some interest versus somebody you're just trying to grab cold out of the aisle, which
Right.
is what a lot of the strategies are for shows is how do I
Mhm.
pull people out of the aisle?
Yeah.
And so it's a very, very much more strategic way of using your shows and then building that into your overall plan so that as they happen during the course of the year, everything's leading up to that. And then you can keep building and building and building from that perspective.
Yeah. And I know we're running out of time, but we haven't even touched on the in booth video that you do when your brand is building a reputation about your live show and live video and podcasts and shorts and all that. Then when you set up a camera with a light and a tripod and a microphone, and I think the mic flag is so important because it makes it look more official. You got this continuity, and doing that in a booth draws a lot of traffic. People are curious,
Mhm.
right? I mean, we know that we're all looky loos, right? But you walk by a booth and there's a camera set up and there's lights and somebody's being interviewed and you have a real microphone. You're not just doing a selfie thing. It captures attention, and it also brings up to mind, oh yeah, I've seen their videos before, and we use those in the booth. And then we can also use those as snippets that we do geofencing advertising around, for a 1 mile or 2 mile radius of the show, so that they're seeing us when they're at lunch and they open up Instagram because they want to take a break from work. They're in Instagram, they're in TikTok, and all of a sudden there's video there, and you're like, oh, that booth's right over here,
Yeah.
right? It's drawing more attention and interest and leads people into the booth. I love Mark's question.
Yeah. So, yeah, a mic
Yeah,
flag mark
yeah,
is if you've ever, when you watch ESPN or whatever, and they're interviewing somebody and they have that little ESPN or CNN or whatever on the microphone, that's called a mic flag. So
yeah.
it
The little
identifies,
plastic thing that goes
yeah,
around it.
yeah.
Yeah,
And it's amazing how much that mic flag, if you put your own logo on it, right? So if you're in a booth and you have your logo and you're doing interviews with it, it's amazing that by itself how many people will just be interested and more interested. It looks more official. It looks more, I don't know. It just looks cooler. I don't
yeah.
know
It's
any
more
other way.
impressive, and it's a
More impressive.
attention getter,
Yeah, it's
right?
attention.
And then if you're doing all these other pieces of the shows and the shorts and everything, it's that continuity of using video. And then it's not just being video, but it's the amount of content you create and then how you continually use that content, which we just keep reiterating over and over again. But thanks for that question, Mark.
Yeah. But I think if you were to tie all this together, the title of the show today was How to Dominate the Newsfeed with Social Selling and Digital Marketing. If you tie all this together, what we're talking about isn't a one trick tactic. It's like, how do you look at what you're trying to accomplish, whether it's over 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and then use these things together in a way
Right,
so that 1 + 1 + 1 is way more than three. Right.
right,
And then what we've seen is over the last year in particular, by implementing these things and watching people we've been working with and so forth go through this, that the overall amplification, the overall acceleration that occurs by using the three things together, episodic content. So you have all kinds of stuff happening between shows, right? Between in-person shows. You're
right,
building your personal brand, you're building your reputation. And then when you get to the show, that show is super productive. And so if you're spending 50 grand, 100 grand, whatever it is to be at the show, it's not a waste. It's actually a big springboard to then get you to the next level. But
right.
without doing all these things together, it doesn't really work, or it doesn't get the
Yeah.
results you're looking for.
Yeah. So summarizing this up, when you have one or two members of senior leadership with a thriving LinkedIn presence, thought leadership, their own videos, their own social posts. You have several people at leadership level, mid leadership, whatever you want to call it. You have salespeople, ops people, customer success people, and you don't have to have the whole team, right? Ask for the volunteers that want to learn how to do this and they're willing to do it. And it's not that they have to be on LinkedIn every single day. It's, sharing post a couple times a week, commenting and engaging with a specific group of people, 25, 50, whatever it may be. And we're commenting and staying top of mind. That's how we digitally dominate the newsfeed, because now it's not just your company post. You got your senior leadership that are posting and commenting. You have salespeople that are posting and commenting. You have customer success that's posting and commenting. And what it builds is a persona around the company where your industry feel like they know you. And when they're in market, when they're ready, they come to you and give you the opportunity to compete. And in some places, they don't even go to others because your
Right.
reputation
Right.
precedes you,
Right.
and they come to you and say, "We're ready for you now." I mean, we've experienced this multiple times with people that have just said, "Hey, we need your help," and there
Right.
wasn't like, "Oh, you're in an RFP" or
Right.
anything else.
We're
They came to you and said,
evaluating five
"Yeah,
companies and,
yeah,
there's none of that. No.
no, they've been evaluating over a period of time. And because our show and our content and our personal brands are really dominating because most competitors just aren't doing it, they come to you and they say, we need your help. It's
Yeah.
time to talk.
Yeah. And I'm going to an event on Saturday. I'll be in an event, a conference. In a booth might be too strong a word, but it's with my software company, and we have a table there. And I've already had people. First of all, I'm going to track everything just so I can report back on Wednesday what
Hmm.
happens. But I've had people from the show who watched my other show that I'm on going out of their way to introduce people and bring me to my booth there because I think that we should meet in person. I mean, the side effects are really large. So I'm really interested to watch how the quality of all this plays out, and I'll
Hmm.
document it. But
Yeah.
we've all been to a lot of shows, right?
Yeah.
And we've left there, spent a lot of money, and then nothing really comes out of it.
Right.
This gives you an opportunity to really to change that.
Yeah, and don't discount and the celebrity word gets blown out of proportion, but call it the celebrity effect of it, right? When you have your show and the shorts are going out and they see you a lot of times in the news feed and you're sharing quality content and a lot of other people are engaging with you. There's a bit of a celebrity effect that when you then have the booth you're at the show is a lot of people come to you
Mhm.
because they perceive you, and this is your personal brand, your reputation. They perceive you as knowledgeable, influential, a key figure in your industry, however you want to describe it. But they're now coming to you and want to talk to you.
Mhm. And
And your
not because
competitors
you're a
don't have that.
celebrity, but because they value what you're going to talk about.
Right. And
Right,
that's why it's a celebrity
right,
effect, if
right,
you will.
right.
Right.
Celebrity thought leader.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've done a good job of covering the three accelerators. Just one last thing before we end off here, because a question comes a lot. Where do we start, right, with this? I don't know that there's, I think that the most important place to start is to look at all three of these. So look at your events, look at what you've got coming over the next 12 months or whatever. What are the events? What do you want to get out of those? And then look at what you can start with on the personal brand, which may be the fastest way. And
Hmm.
then start to look at maybe after that, how you incorporate the episodic content. But I think the way to start is to look at the right mindset and the right strategy for this. That's the place to
Hmm.
start, is to look at the strategy, the approach, and then some of the tactics can be layered in over time.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be a little bit bold and say the best place to start is with senior leadership, and which is why at Fist Bump we've created our Done for You program for senior leadership for C-suite. Um, so if your leadership, I think a lot of times leadership thinks they should be more active on LinkedIn, but they don't have time or they don't know where to start. That's why we created this program, and I do believe personally that is the right place to start because when your senior leadership becomes active, and it's not just, oh, marketing creates some things and throws it up on their LinkedIn profile, but it's actually your senior leaders with video, with carousel posts, with article posts and things like that. When they become more active, it's got a trickle down effect to everything else. And when they experience what we're talking about, they start getting LinkedIn connections coming to them. They get customers coming to them asking for help. And all of a sudden that light bulb goes off of like, wow, this stuff really works. So that's why I think, and that's why we created it, to be honest. Like training and coaching a C suite person to do their own is really, really tough. They're super busy, they don't have time. But with Fist Bump, our commenting AI, how we train the brain to sound like them so we can comment as if we are them, that is super, super powerful. So I would say if you have questions about that, reach out to us. We'd love to share it with you. We can always train and coach people in our content, in our community, in our paid group coaching and things like that. We can teach people. But if you want to hack it and just get right to the front of the line, just let us do it for you. We get people C-suite up and running within a month, and they're then active. We're commenting on 100 people's social post engagements and creating video content for them, creating post content for them. It is really super amazing how quickly that changes the
Yeah.
persona of the brand and your C-suite leader.
And that ties into Mark's question about a personal brand assessment to evaluate your current personal brand and build that roadmap for improvement over time. We
Yeah,
could we should do a show on that because
yeah,
there's a whole process that we look at to say, okay, well, where do you want to be? Right? What do you want to
yeah,
accomplish? And kind of then work backwards to build that into the framework there. But
yeah,
really good point. All right,
yeah.
we're almost
All
out
right,
of time here.
we were out of time 5 minutes
We were
ago,
out of
maybe.
time 5 minutes ago. Thanks. as
But
always,
before
great questions. Yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, I was say before we go, if you're listening to us on the podcast or you're watching on the show, we really would appreciate you guys so much and our audience and the comments we get and the messages that we get. But if you're watching the show or listening on the podcast, we'd really appreciate subscribe. If you think this is valuable, screen capture it, send it to a friend that you think this would add value to. It's not all about the ratings, but it definitely helps. So we're currently number one, number two on Apple for social selling, and that's exciting for us. And so if you get value out of what we do, we would appreciate that help as well.
And we've got a big lineup of guests coming up again over the next
Yeah,
few weeks. So,
yeah.
um, hopefully Carson's job will settle back down so we can get him back on the thing here. But
Get
yeah, lots of good
the
stuff
three
coming.
amigos back together.
Yeah. All right.
Perfect.
Well, thanks, Brandon. Thanks everybody for the comments. Have a good week, and we'll see you next Wednesday.